Okay, so we're going to do a demonstration on sod mats, plugs, and bare root. So we have, actually I'm just going to let Jeff explain.
So we brought obviously one sod mat. Actually this hydrology, if it were to stay like this, is ideal. We like to have it, the only time it fails is when there's too much water, meaning overtopping the mats for a long period. They obviously can't grow underwater for very long, or being high and dry. So the ideal hydrology is, 2 to 4 inches of water. So this is perfect. And we literally, this was very light because it's been sitting in the sun and we brought it down from our nursery, so it doesn't have a ton of moisture in it. But normally more hands is better. The hay hooks are the best way we found to move it. They're obviously dangerous, so you need to be careful about swinging those around people. Get the longer ones than the shorter ones. You might have to special order those if you're going to do a lot of this, because it will save a lot of stooping. And then we also brought a couple of different plant formats. If people want to plant some plants, we don't have to plant them. They're certainly there to be planted. So we have some bare root plants.
Here, hold this, and then I will grab you stuff.
We have bare root plants that I mentioned in the presentation earlier. The key with these is just handling when they're on site. Obviously, if you're going for production numbers, you can't just spread them all out in the hot sun and get around to planting them an hour later. They're already going to be dead. So if you can control that with your crews, you can get equally, as we've done research on this, good success as with a container. A little more challenging to hold for a period on site were those containers, which are here. That would be normally a full flat. We just would rest in the water, and that's how we deal with them at our facility. So they can stay like that forever.
And you grow these hydroponically at your facility?
We do.
In pea gravel?
We do, the bare root.
And do you fertilize them?
We push them, for sure.
Could you just give people a description of what this growing environment is like for these?
Yeah, so we literally grow them in gravel, and we grow them in just fully saturated gravels with, a nutrient solution. We tend to want to try to push for root growth, so we're doing a lot more top growth management. You can't really have it both ways with growing the plants. You can either push for higher above ground or below ground growth, and we're trying to get you the most, rhizome material. A lot of this material is actually going to die shortly after planting, die back, and we're going to get success from rhizomes that are in the plant. So that's not anything to be alarmed about. We've planted, you go out and plant 10,000 and get a call, they're all dead. They're not dead. They are shocked, but they will send up new shoots. So that's bare root. If people want to plant some of these, we can, or again, we can take them back. I don't know what our timing is. Might as well plant them.
Who wants to plant some plants? Can you tell us how you would, literally how would you plant this?
Yeah, so with a bare root plant, we tend to use a planting bar or a wedge. And it's like any sort of pitfall from a forestry seedling to these plants. We want to try to minimize any air in the root system, so air gaps. And you want to get the plant really installed at the soil surface where the root crown is. So we don't want them planted too deep. These plants aren't quite as sensitive as other plants you might have worked with to that, but still will get much better growth and have less problems if you get the soil right at that transition from root to shoot.
Do you want to narrate what Adrian is doing here?
Do I want to cut out a hole, or do I want to just make
You want to open a hole. I mean, this soil is fairly ideal, so that's fine.
Okay.
And the big thing is the depth. So you want to make sure you don't go too deep where the plant's going to be.
Like that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's too far.
But and then you're literally just putting a plant in.
It's not. I was thinking it was that whole bunch.
Yeah, there's a few plants there.
Okay. Well, yeah.
So that's a single one right there.
And we try not to get J rooting. Does everyone know what that means?
No.
So when we jam these roots into the ground, we don't want the roots to be coming up into the air. That will stress or kill the plant. Again, with some of these wetland plants, a lot of this is actually shoot material and you can get away with that. But ideally, if we're in the ground and looking at that, that's how we want it to be planted.
Any questions about these bare root? Yeah, question there.
First off, planting season, do these have a more compressed season and the wider season?
So where we do most of our planting, the things we worry about are frost heaving, especially with a container. So we don't like to plant too late. I do a lot of planting at elevation and we cut it off somewhere mid-August.
We'll need more bare root because we have exposed roots. Do we care about seasonality here?
And the other concern we worry about is herbivory. And mostly if you're in a migratory scenario like this, they'll just pull the plants out of the ground. So that's a consideration as well. This is, of course, after hydrology. That's the overriding consideration.
Second question, obviously shipping costs are going to be lower bare root. Any other benefits going bare root versus plugs?
I like bare root again because I can get more plants per area, and I really think that's important, especially in a site with a lot of weed pressure. We deal a lot with reed canary grass. We work on almost no Phragmites sites directly, but we deal with reed canary grass and cattail and other, clonal species that are killing diversity.
So I think Adrian was asking lots of questions and Becca was giving her advice about the planting. I was wondering if Becca could just tell people what you were suggesting to her, just for those that haven't done this before. Would you mind talking, maybe standing near Jeff and talking in the mic there? I'll hold the plant.
Okay. Yeah, so she just had a couple of questions on the depth, which we kind of went over, but you want to match the depth of how far the plant is going down with that change in color right where the crown of the plant is. You don't want to go more shallow to where there's roots sticking out, and you don't want to go too deep where you're basically just have a little green stem sticking out, because either way would probably kill the plant. And then the other question, yeah, so she's basically just stomping that, what is the term for it again?
Oh
metal.
yeah, just making a slot, opening it up, putting the plant in. Some people will make a slot adjacent and pull the soil. Does that make sense? So you'll put a slot in, open it up, drop a plant in, and then slot here and close it. That's faster, but I don't think it's as effective because we still see problems with getting air in the root zone. The other thing to know, this hydrology is, pretty much ideal. So both these formats really can't be planted in inundated conditions. So you have to consider that with the scheduling the planting. It's impossible to keep them anchored. If we go in and say we're planting in 6 inches of water, it's impossible. That just doesn't happen. So, if you know your hydrology, you try to time that. The best is to plant into wet soils and then the plants start to root and it gradually comes up, and that's the best scenario. But keep that in mind. You wouldn't want to show up with a ton of plants, and if this was our planting area, we had 4 inches of water, we just couldn't, they just pop out of the hole. So keep that in mind.
Okay, so I think we should do the sod mat demo.
Sure.
You wanna get to work. I'm gonna stick the rest in here for now. Okay. But maybe Jeff doesn't need to do the.
I can't. Yeah.
You should not do that.
Here, I'll take one of those actually.
Yeah?
Yeah. You'll probably.
All right. Okay. So if you
Did we already cut it? I'm assuming.
Yep.
Perfect.
can you turn that way and talk into that.
Yes. Sorry.
You're good.
So, a couple of things. If you're dealing with a lot of this material at one time, things to consider is how long it's going to be sitting out in the sun. It actually is very resilient to holding a lot of moisture, but it's hard to re-wet once it dries out, so you want to try to keep it wet. And then if you're installing this, you know, in a linear fashion, and it's like putting a puzzle together. So you want someone ahead, you know, measuring out how far you're going to go on the run. Because if we start laying it all out and then realize, oh shit, you know, we have there's a gap here we have to fill, you're moving every piece. And at that point, it's already been saturated and it's just a lot of effort. So be thinking about how it's going to fit in before you lay it down. And then it's as simple as, in this case, ideal conditions, we would just roll that out. On some of our sites, if there's not a lot of energy, we would use few or no stakes. If you have wave energy, you definitely need to use stakes. If you're on a stream, you need to use a lot of stakes. Oftentimes we would be, if you imagine the water being at the toe of this dike and we're installing on that dike face, we'd want to position the sod so that the normal water line is coming about halfway into the mat. So half of it's inundated in water and then half of it's just unsaturated soil. In those cases, it's important to put a bead of soil on the upland edge to keep wind from getting under there just during establishment. If you can water this in, or if we have hydrology and things are good, you wouldn't be able to pull it off the ground in 2-3 weeks. It'll be impossible. So keep that in mind. If you're thinking, well, I'm just going to put it here and see how things work out, we might adjust it. It's hard to move once it starts to root. It's impossible to move, really. We try, when we're staking it, we try to put the stakes in on an angle, and all of this is on our website. There's an install guide and videos, but we try to put the stakes in on an angle so that the mat doesn't ride on the stakes, it stays on the ground. So we use the stakes to kind of pinch it to the ground.
Solid.
Perfect.
Solid.
It's really fun to stake them in if anyone else wants to come and try.
Super fun. She's way faster than me.
We would normally, we had limited tools just given where our install crews are, but this can be done better with a engineer's hammer, you know, like a metal engineer's hammer is the way to go.
Do you want to explain like staking patterns at all, or?
Yeah, they're kind of variable, but it's all, I would just look at the guide on our website, you know, that it depends on how much energy you have. And something like this, there'd be like 8 stakes for that mat. If we knew there was never going to be wave action here, there might be 5. The edges, when we install them right next to each other, we try to have 1 stake through 2 mats to keep the whole mat together.
While they're doing that, you want to, I'm looking on this side.
Yeah, so we have some containerized plants. Do you want to pull that out of there?
Yep.
And you can see the advantage of these plants as far as fine roots, and it's a beautiful plant. They're more expensive to grow. We grow a ton of them, and if we're growing from your source, this is the choice because we can't really grow bare root for you. So there's some things to consider about this too. When they're being stored, waiting to be planted, you should have the whole rack in the water. All of this stuff we try to use absolutely as many times as possible before we take it to the landfill. So keep track of the containers and we'll bring them back to the nursery and sterilize and wash them all. It's a lot of plastic. Those racks are expensive. And we usually install these with a dibble, and that's just a piece of machined metal that's essentially the identical shape of the container, and it goes really fast. And you're just, if you want to hold that for a sec here.
Yep.
these are dibbles we had built, maybe $100 to have a machinist make. And you want to have it matched because you'll be much faster installing. And it's literally just getting a hole in the ground. And we usually work with two people teams. Someone will dibble for a half hour and someone will install plants. And we'll just drop the plants in the hole. And we have the same considerations for air gaps. So spend a little extra time on making sure the plants are not just going into their death. Because that's a, $1.25 to $1.50 just the plant. We need to have them work. So take a little more care in the planting.
Great.
We can plant some more if anyone wants to try.
Does anybody want to come and have a go at it?
Put all these plants in the ground, or we can take them back to our nursery and.
Come on up.
Have you considered offering that dibble as a product later on? Seems like something.
Yeah, that's nice.
People a lot of.
We do loan them out.
Okay.
Yeah, so we work with a lot of volunteer groups. There's so much work to go around in this field.
Yeah.
We just want plants in the ground. So if we're not using them, we have tons of bars and I loan them out all the time. So like the Nature Conservancy and.
Can we borrow 30?
Yeah. If you can get them to me and take them back. Yeah. Sure.
So that dibble bar seems pretty slick for planting a whole bunch. I will say in my right hand I've got a hori knife, and we did a bunch of plantings last weekend. We only had a couple dibble bars, and we had a ton of these horis. So these also work well, especially if you're trying to get through a lot of thick saltgrass roots. You can kind of stab it into the ground and then rotate around, and it gets to be about the same size as the plug.
That would work too. For
so
sure.
it's low. It's you can't use your body weight quite as much, but it's a really good arm workout.
It's more stooping.
More stooping, that's true. Okay, other questions about plugs, sod mats, or bare root?
Yeah. So you wouldn't recommend sod mats in a lake, for instance?
Oh no, we do use them. It's just given cost, you want to be sparing where you put them.
Yeah.
Because we would tend to put them in places where we have high erosion potential, and then plant behind those with cheaper material.
But considering dynamic environments of the lake conditions, sod mats, you would still protect the edge of the lake, or would you want to
If your budget allowed it, you could put them wherever. And the one advantage here, of course, is we wouldn't be able to plant that with these other formats because it's too much water. But we can put a sod mat in there and it's fine.
What's the deepest water you've planted sod mats in?
So for like hard stem, 6 inches, 9 inches.
Okay.
Certainly once they're established, they can tolerate feet of water, but
Yeah.
getting them established, we still don't want to push it too much. And if you're going to have deep planting conditions, we'd want to know because it would affect our trimming schedule.
Yeah.
We'd want to leave some more straws out of the ground and not cut them back.
So with deep water conditions, are you most worried about the mat becoming dislodged with, say, wave action, or floating to the top?
Mostly overtopping them.
Overtop?
Yeah, that's what we worry about.
I'm gonna 1 second. I'm gonna repeat the question in 1 second. So there was a question about how much wicking occurs, especially if
Provide water for the high and dry.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we're forced to deal with that scenario mostly because again we're on a stream bank or on a shoreline and it's not a perfectly flat sweet spot like that. If we could get it in a zone like that, it would be more effective. It will work fine on a slope. We almost always water the mats in. That's a key step. So even though it looks like it's saturated to the eye under the mat, we bucket, and we found the fastest way to do that is with 5-gallon buckets. So we just swamp those mats and You should do that. And on the upper edge, like I said, if you have some soil, just putting a little bead of soil along that edge to keep air from getting up under the mat makes a big difference on just shock of planting. It's an extra step, but it works better.
I love that. I mean, actually using wicking material when you're putting in the container plants that are slightly higher up the slope. So like wicking material would actually go down a little bit deeper than you're putting the roots.
Like some peat moss or
Well, I mean, I've just used it in laboratory settings, but
like dry water or some
yeah,
polymer.
it's just the water's below, plants are growing, and it's coming up through a wicking material, whatever it is. And so I can see that just having a slice of that, put it in lower than where you put the container, so it's reaching the lower, wetter soil, and then have the container. It could help bring the water to the container roots.
We've done things like that when we're working more with, other drier communities for sure. I haven't tried that with wetland plants. There is a lot of peat in the container medium, so that will help too, for sure.
Okay, so if you turn around and look over there, you'll see the sod mats that we installed August 30th and 31st last year. And there also are a whole bunch on the other side as well. And Lauren has been monitoring these all spring and summer. They're looking pretty crispy right now because of the water levels have been so dry, and our summers are hot and getting hotter. But you'll see that we put them, as I mentioned earlier, perpendicular to the water line. And I remember a phone call I had with Jeff asking him if that was a good idea, and we decided maybe, and that this was the time to try it out. And the water levels are very unpredictable year to year, and we just had to go for it. And this spring, these looked great. And so our guess is that they're going to bounce back again in the spring after they've basically gone dormant now. And we put in both hard stem bulrush and 3-square bulrush. And just hitting on the timing of this, we basically delivered seed to North Fork Native Plants in the fall, and then they cold stratified the seeds. They planted the seeds into plugs. They grew plugs around January, February, March, roughly, April. And then once it was warm enough outside, they transplanted them into the coir fiber mats. When do you normally do that, Jeff, in Idaho?
Well, yeah, April is kind of pushing it. What we've learned is trying to start too early and then get like a 28-degree night, even when you're installing this on your site, that sets the growth back. So we end up not gaining anything in growth. When we're installing these, I like to wait, a couple extra weeks so we're not going to get a 25-degree night.
So basically they're planting into the coconut fiber mats as soon as they feel pretty confident that the winter time or the nighttime temperatures aren't going to be too cold.
Right.
And then you're growing them out over the course of the growing season. And then August 30th, we received a massive truckload. You had your trailer piled high. I'm trying to remember if we had more than one.
I think it was just one.
Was it just one? I think we ordered 90 mats. And I actually looked up our numbers for those 90 mats. We had about 12 people there to receive the trailer worth of mats. We then transferred them over to trailers that we attached to DWR trucks the next day so we could get them out to the site. So when we got them, we had a whole crew of us using these hay hooks, getting them onto the trailer. We watered the heck out of them because they'd just taken a long trip down from Idaho. We covered them in tarps overnight. We parked them in the shade. And then the next day, we had a crew of approximately 24 people who helped a bunch of DWR folks, Forestry, Fire, State Lands, USU people, and a lot of volunteers, some of you who are out here today. So then we proceeded to water them for 3 weeks. And that is because it was still before David England and his colleagues here raised the water again. After the irrigation season is over, they have more access to water. They raise the water for the fall hunt. But to get us through that 3 week period, as I mentioned earlier, we had to water them every other day with a whole bunch of trash pumps. So we had a team that was here watering, and then there's another set of mats around the corner, so we had another pump there. The biggest issues were the pumps kept getting clogged over and over again, and we had to do a ton of troubleshooting to get those pumps to work. Keith, you want to come closer? Yeah.
So the pumps were dropped in the water here in the pond behind you, and then we ran hoses over the dike, so we were just moving water from the impounded pond out here. We did experiment with sprinklers, and that actually worked pretty well. If I came by myself, I could set up a bunch of pumps, turn the sprinklers on, move to the next patch, hand water those, go back, unhook the sprinklers, move them to the next site, go hand water some others. So you could get a lot of watering done fast. We had could run 5 pumps at once, but it was really labor intensive for 3 weeks.
Yes.
It worked.
Another thing that we've used
Why don't
effectively
you come closer?
if anyone has access to a water truck, so if this was our install site next to a road, that can be very efficient for watering because you want to flood them in. And we've seen that used. Or if you get a big pile and it's 100 degrees, have a water truck just soak the whole pile and they'll be wet for the day. So that can be effective too.
Does anybody here have a water truck?
We've got 2.
And
We have 2 water trailers.
water trailers. Okay, so keep that in mind, who we need to call upon next time. Any other questions about the sod mats or plug planting? Anything else here? David, anything we're missing that we need to mention? Yep.
I'll add, maybe you mentioned this, we put hard stem bulrush.
You're very quiet.
Is this thing working?
Yeah.
We put hard stem bulrush on the impounded wetland because it typically seems to do better with constant inundation. And then we put more of the 3 square bulrush on the outside where we knew we were going to have fluctuating water levels. If you look, you can see the hard stem is still green over there, and then the 3 square is looking pretty crispy on the outside here. If you look close, there's a little bit of green in there. We're hoping they come back. But we had that 3 weeks of watering to get them through until the water levels came up. Then this spring, they absolutely took off until we had 98 degrees for 4 months straight and a slow water drawdown. And we watched them slowly dry up. So fingers crossed that they come back. Maybe I'll just go through what we're looking at here really quick first. So this is another round of sod mats that we did at the same time as those other ones. Hard stem and 3 square. Again, hopefully they are going to hang on. I've noticed that you can see in places that they've actually spread outside of their mat itself. So that tells me they have some good roots established. If you were to walk around, this leading edge over here has some green plant.
Literally right in front. There you go.
It has some green plant growing out. So anyway, hopefully they come back to life. But more what we wanted to show you here was we've done multiple seedings in this location. With drastically fluctuating water levels. But our biggest one that we did this spring, and if you, okay, so we have sod mats, and then we have a kind of thatch pile of Phragmites. Just past that is some saltgrass that has recently germinated, and what you can see is this whole field. It's actually a chenopode that has taken off. I think from our disking, we brought the seed bank to life, but intermixed with all of that chenopodium is saltgrass. So we dissed and seeded 40 acres, and we've had a lot of water for the last 2 seasons. So this site was super wet this spring, and we were waiting for water levels to come down in order to do the seeding. And as Lauren mentioned, seeding is labor intensive, so we have to have a lot of people's schedules line up, and we just got really lucky and threaded this needle where water levels came down. We had probably 2 inches of water on the site. We pulled the disc plow through the site, and it lifted the soil in places just high enough to catch our seed when we dropped it out here. Then the site rapidly dried, and That's why we really like saltgrass as one of our workhorse species. It germinated and got established enough that even though this was bone dry, I just walked out here last week and there's saltgrass seedlings throughout. They're still green. So I think our main thing here is just, threading that timing, like this really small window that we had where we have tons of water to no water, and then having, after 6 years of trying a bunch of different stuff, having this very simple method with a species that works to claim this 40 acres of what once was all Phragmites.
Fantastic.
Good?
Any questions at the stop? Ben has a question here.
What's the method behind the spacing of the mats here? 'Cause it looks like they're tighter over there, but you're smiling like maybe
I like that you're asking about the method. There was a method to our madness at the time. We were trying to we were looking at staggering them and whether it mattered if they were directly lined up really close together or if they would fill in if we put spaces in between. So there was a kind of background, a little bit of a messy experiment happening in the background. That's why they were
alternating from a foot to touching.
Thank you. Alternating from a foot apart to touching.
What's the
And
answer?
5 mat patches.
What is the answer, Lauren?
The rhizome layers actually do seem to come out and they're filling in those in between levels. So I would say you could get away with spacing them further apart.
So Lauren, for those of you that you couldn't hear her response, when they were a foot apart, they really did seem, even within one growing season, to fill in that gap. And it's a challenge because these sod mats are so expensive. You get very high survival, but trying to cover large areas is challenging. So we were trying to figure out, could we squeeze every last drop out of these sod mats? That was the strategy there. Every penny, yep. Any other questions? Okay, so we have